publish, and we'll pick up your quiz as well.
So
Usually
I
it's
have
like
to
that.
re-enter the code.
I'm sorry?
This happened
Oh
yesterday.
yeah, don't even worry about it. I'll come back and turn it off. You can just let it run like it is. You should be all set.
When am I? So I'm waiting for it to appear in the.
In order to do that, you can get started. Everyone's able to see what you're doing right now.
There's a delay
Online.
for. I need to be able to see it to see the chat.
Yeah. And
So I just have to wait until that comes up.
Yeah. And when you're done with class, you can just leave that browser open, and that'll let you have the address that you need to work on it later as well.
So when I turn it up, I just need to look for an option. I should put it on the SDs, and then it just gives us the.
Yeah, and like I say, I can come back and do that with you. Just to be sure.
So I don't see any live stream on the.
Yeah, like I say, it usually takes about a minute and a half, 2 minutes for it to show up. Okay, you're live now into the video. So you went to the Kemper Classroom 2 link?
Yep.
And then under, let's see, which, there's home and then there's videos. Yeah, under videos, you've got 3 people online.
I don't have it.
So it's not coming up on yours?
Mm-hmm. I keep refreshing too. To see if it'll come up, so. Let's see.
That is interesting because it's, yeah, I mean, you've already got folks in the class. Online. You connected to the internet? Yep.
Something similar happened in chapel this morning. For me, there was a big delay before it appeared.
Okay.
So I'll just start and then we'll see if it comes up.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because like I say, it's been up, came on about 2.5 minutes after we started. I'm not sure what that's about. Yeah, so you're up here.
There's a big delay.
Yeah, I don't know why it's happening on yours, but.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, you good. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hebrew class. And I see some of you joining in now, watching the stream. And yeah, you're right. There's about a 5-minute delay it looks like we're working with at this point. At least getting it started on the stream. So, and now the stream that I have up is getting closer to real time. So we're going to start. I see people joining in. And as we did with Old Testament class, I hope that as soon as you have a question, you'll type it in the chat because there is a delay. And then when I'm able, I will try to respond to those questions. And today I'll try to leave the stream on longer at the end because we don't, well, actually we might have a class coming in here after us. So I'll try to leave it on a little bit, but don't wait till the end to ask a question. And also, in this class, I'm going to try to, when I cover a topic, have everybody respond to say if you're ready to move on or not, or if you need more explanation. And I'll tell you when to do that. And then I like everybody who's on to give me a response so I know if you're ready to move on. Hopefully we'll have some interaction that way, some questions as we go. Take out your Hebrew prayers, please, and we'll begin our class with our Hebrew prayers. Today's prayer is the prayer for Friday, Psalm 139, verses 23 and 24. Adonai imachem. Nitpalala. Chokreni el. Vada levavi. B'chaneni vada sarapai. Ure'im derech otzev bi. Unecheni b'derech olam. Amen. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Amen. I'm looking over our prayer today to see if we have any of the concepts that we're talking about in class. I don't think we have any from our prayer for today. Today we get into the subject again of pronouns. And you will remember that we've already talked about some types of pronouns. Let's begin back with the definition of a pronoun. What is a pronoun? A pronoun is a word that can take the place of a noun, or it can refer back to a noun in its context. So if I was speaking about Stephen, and then I moved on in the context, I could use the pronoun he to refer back to the proper noun, Stephen. And so far we've seen pronouns that are subject pronouns. They are independent pronouns that can serve as a subject in the sentence. We've also just recently looked at possessive pronouns. And the difference of the possessive pronouns is that they are attached as suffixes to the end of nouns to indicate possession. As in the example that we've looked at, libi, that's the noun lave, heart, with the possessive pronoun suffix, e, the chirik yod, which indicates the first person common singular possessive pronoun, my heart. Today, we're going to move into some other categories of pronouns, and we're going to look at two different types, demonstrative pronouns and a relative pronoun. The demonstrative pronoun is, as its name indicates, it's a demonstrating pronoun. It's a pointing pronoun. It's pointing at something in its context. And there are both near and distant demonstrative pronouns. If you're pointing at something that is near to the speaker, or if you're pointing at something that is distant from the speaker. Let's use the English demonstrative pronouns to get a feel for how these work before we get into the Hebrew. So if I wanted to refer to the pen I have in my hand and point to it and indicate it, I would say this pen. This pen. This is the demonstrative pronoun in that phrase. And if I want to refer to the clock on the wall in the back of the room, I would say that clock. It's distant from me as the speaker. If I wanted to refer to the materials here on the podium that are close to me, I would say these materials. If I wanted to refer to the objects on the table at the back of the room, which you can't see right now, but you've seen before, that table at the back with all the things on it, I would say those things on the table in the back of the room. So we have these pointing words that we use with nouns. And we can point at things that are singular, up close, near, and plural, up close and near, this and these. Or things that are singular and plural that are distant from the speaker, that and those. And in English, as you know, we don't use the gender as often, or it's not explicit as often as it is in Hebrew. So I would use those same pronouns for masculine, feminine, or neuter in English. But in Hebrew, we know that we're going to have to indicate gender. So that's going to be a difference when we come to the Hebrew versions. So I've put on the board here these demonstrative pronouns that we're looking at today. And they can be broken down into two groups, the near and the distant. So let me put up near and distant. These are the near. And here are the distant. Let's take the near first. We have singular and masculine. So if the thing to which I refer is singular and masculine, I will say zeh, this. For the sake of argument, let's suppose that a pen is masculine. I would say zeh, because it's near to me, singular, and it's masculine, so I would refer to it with zeh, this. Let's presume, for the sake of the argument and the sake of the illustration, that a glasses case is feminine. I would say zot when I refer to this glasses case. It's near to me, it's singular, but it's feminine. So I would have to use the word zot to refer to a feminine noun. Now when we come to the plural column, we have over there C, which we've seen in our paradigms so far. Remember, C refers to common, which doesn't mean something like neuter, a third gender. It actually means it can refer either to masculine or to feminine. Because remember, in Hebrew, there are only two genders, masculine and feminine. So, handy for us, we don't have to learn two forms, we only have to learn one form in the plural near demonstrative, which is the word ele. And notice that ele has the accent on the first letter. I'm looking at the video here, and I can see that it's pretty hard to see those vowel points. The consonants are coming through clear, but it's hard to see those vowel points. Let me see if I can darken them some. Zeh has a segel. Zot has a cholam. Ele has a tsere, accent mark, and a segel with a dagesh. Let's see if that comes out. It'll take a second before I can see it. Ele is accented on the first syllable. As we know that the default stress position in Hebrew is the last syllable, and so we don't mark it, but I'll always try to mark it when it's not on that last syllable so that we'll be able to learn the correct pronunciation where the stress should be. And that looks like the vowels are much clearer now. Yep, Mark is saying it's difficult, and now he's saying, yeah, I can see it a lot better. Good, thank you, Mark. I think I can see it here on my screen too, that it's much clearer now. So I'll try to make those vowels darker. So we're looking at the plural near demonstrative pronoun, which is common. which means it can refer either to masculine or to feminine. So, and this is, again, we're just doing this hypothetically for the sake of the illustration, but let's say we have books here, okay, and they're masculine. So I can use ele to refer to these, a group of things that's masculine. Okay? Or if they were feminine, if there was a group of feminine things that are near to me as the speaker, I could also say ele. All right? It can be used for either one. They still have their own genders. They retain their genders, either masculine or feminine. But the demonstrative pronoun itself is the same. I can use the same one because it's common. After we go over the near demonstrative pronouns and then we go over the distant demonstrative pronouns, I'm going to give you examples, and we'll look at some examples. All right, so get ready to give me feedback after I cover the distant demonstrative pronouns. I'm going to take a second to darken the vowels here so you can see them, and then be ready to give me some feedback when I come to the end of this section. All right? This is a shurik here in this one. This is a kurik yod down here. And we have a tsere here. We have a tsere here. And we have a komets with dagesh in there and an accent mark. So hopefully you're looking at these distant demonstrative pronouns and you're thinking, these look familiar to me. I've seen these before. And you have. Hopefully you learned them before when we covered them. If not, you get another chance to learn them, to practice them some more. These look familiar because these are the subject pronouns that we already learned. In the third person. Okay, so it's not all the subject pronouns. Right, we had hu, he, ata, at, ani. Right, so we're not including the second person and the first person, just the third person subject pronouns here. But we have learned them before, so now we're seeing that they have another function. In addition to serving as the subject of a sentence, they can be used as distant demonstrative pronouns. So let's do the same hypothetical exercise just to get the idea of how these work here, okay? So instead of talking about things that are near to me, I'm talking about things that are distant. So I'm seeing on that back table at the back of the room a mug. And let's say that the mug is masculine for the sake of the argument, for the sake of the example. So if I wanted to refer to that, I could say who, right? Which we know is he, but in this case, because I'm pointing at something, I'm indicating something that is distant, I could use it as a demonstrative pronoun, and it would be that. In English, that would be the translation. That mug on the back. But I also see on the back table a roll of paper towel for cleaning the whiteboard. There's a roll of paper towel back there. And let's say that that's feminine. So I wouldn't say who for the roll of paper towel. I would say he. He, the feminine. And in English, we don't differentiate the gender, so I would use the same translation of that. Because, as you remember, in Hebrew, who is he and he is she, right? But it turns out that who is also that, and he is also that when it comes to demonstrative pronouns. All right, now let's move over to the plural column. In the plural column, I'm looking back there, and I'm seeing a group of mugs on the back table. And so now it's plural. I have to use the plural. So I'm going to say heim. Heim, those in English. Distant demonstrative pronoun in the plural. Those. But I also see papers on the back table. And let's say that those are feminine. So I wouldn't say heim, because they're feminine. I have to say heina. Accent on the first syllable. Heina. To refer to those papers on the back table. But in English, we don't differentiate the gender also in the plural, so we're going to have to use the word those again. I didn't write the translation up here in the near. It would be this and this again. And over here, these. All right? So, near demonstrative pronouns. Ze, masculine, this. Zot, feminine, this. Ela, common, translated, these. Distant demonstrative pronouns. Who, masculine, translated that. He, feminine, translated that in English. In the plural. Those, heim. Heina, feminine, translated those. The great thing for us is that we only have to learn 3 forms. Ze, zot, and ele. Those are the new forms for us. We've already learned these other forms. So for them, we just have to learn that they can be used as demonstrative pronouns. All right, now at this time I want to take a poll and see if anybody needs me to go over anything again. You can just say move on or review. I'm going to write an example up here in the corner while you have some time to respond. I hope to get some responses right now. Getting lots of positive responses. People are tracking. Okay. Good, very good. Okay. It's like most people are ready. Let me give you an example of this. You remember in Old Testament our discussion of the Toledot structure of Genesis. That is these formulae, these headings that structure the book of Genesis as a huge genealogy. And that phrase is written up in the corner of the board there. Ele toledot. Ele toledot. Ele is what we just learned this morning with a dagesh. Is the near demonstrative pronoun common plural. Ele, these. These are the toledot, variously translated, generations or descendants. But we'll notice that toledot is what gender? Well, it has the ot ending, the feminine plural ending. So it's plural, we know, and it's feminine. And so Ele can cover it being feminine or masculine. These are the generations. This is that common heading that we find throughout the book of Genesis. Now you know the words that are involved with it in Hebrew after we've discussed that important structuring device in the book of Genesis. All right, let's look at some examples of how this is going to work before we move on to the relative pronoun. If you have a question, now's a good time to put it in the chat because there's going to be a little bit of downtime as I erase the board and put something else up. So if there's anything you need to communicate, go ahead and do so. Okay, looks like people are doing well. I think it'll be helpful for us at this point to review what we know about the adjectives. And you'll see why in just a moment. But let's remember back to the adjective chapter and remember the three major uses of the adjective or functions of the adjective, which actually overlap with the uses of the adjective in English. So that's helpful for us. Can you think back to that and remember what those uses of the adjective are? Number one, the attributive adjective. It's coming back to you now. The attributive adjective. Remember the rules of the attributive adjective in Hebrew. The attributive adjective must follow the noun it modifies, rather than in English where the attributive adjective precedes. The attributive adjective in Hebrew must follow the noun it modifies and agree in three things: gender, number, and definiteness. Okay? And then it is conveying an attribute of the noun. It's describing the noun. The second use of the adjective is the predicative use. So in this case, we have a sentence, and the adjective is the predication of the sentence. And you'll remember that in this case, the adjective can precede. It often precedes the noun it modifies, or it relates to. But in some cases, it can follow. So in this case, it's not an absolute rule as it is with the attributive that it must follow. It can precede. So if it precedes, you know what you're dealing with. And then it agrees in two things: gender and number. But it never takes a definite article. So those are the features by which you can determine the predicative use of the adjective, that It doesn't take the article, and it can precede. Can you think of the third use of the adjective in Hebrew? Remember, I like to use the example, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Not just because I like spaghetti westerns, but because that title has 3 attributive adjectives in it. The good refers to a good man. The bad refers to a man, and the ugly refers to a man. So the adjective is standing in the place of a noun, right? It's substituting, or it has substance like a noun. So whenever an adjective does a noun job in the sentence, good. I see that Mark got it. Mark got that one. Whenever a noun does, whenever an adjective does a noun job, it's substantive. And what are the noun jobs? It could be the subject of a verb. It could be the object of a verb. Jobs like that nouns normally do, when they're done by adjectives, will be substantive. So the thing about these demonstrative pronouns is they actually function like adjectives. They're used very much in the same way, and those same functions can apply to them. Attributive, predicative, and substantival. The textbook author doesn't go into the substantival use, but that's also possible. So that you could say this, meaning this man walked to the town. So let's start with the attributive use of the demonstrative pronoun that follows that same pattern that we've seen in the adjective. And we'll use our noun that we have been using so often, Seuss, horse. All right, that's coming through. Here we have Seuss, and we know that Seuss, horse, is masculine singular, don't we? And we see on this form the definite article. Ha. He patach strong dagesh. So if this masculine singular, Seuss, horse, is near to me as the speaker, and I want to point at it, I have to use the near demonstrative pronoun, and I have to match the gender and the number and the definiteness. Now the thing about the noun with the demonstrative pronoun is that it's always definite because you're pointing at it. Once you point at it and say this, it's specific and it's definite. So we're not going to discuss an indefinite example of this. It's definite. And so, just like the construction when we said, the good horse, we would have said, Hasus hatov. So the adjective followed, and it agreed in gender, number, and definiteness. Masculine, singular, definite. This is the exact same construction, but now I'm using the demonstrative pronoun. Hasus hazeh. The horse, the this, literally, in Hebrew word order, and taking each piece of it. The horse, the this. But in English, we have to reverse that order because just like with the attributive adjective, we have to put that attributive adjective before the noun that it modifies. And I don't have to put in these articles in English because once I use this, it's definite. So this would be translated, this horse. So remember, again, we've talked about the process of translation. You want to go word by word, piece by piece, get all the information out in a very literal translation in Hebrew word order. So I would start here and I would say, the horse, the this. And then my next step in translation is to try to get that into better English. So knowing the rules of the attributive use of the demonstrative pronoun, I would turn that into this horse in English. Hopefully you follow that, and it's very similar to a pattern that we've already been discussing in the adjective. Now, since we're talking about attributive adjective, let's add an adjective to this phrase and see what happens. I'm getting a question from Ian, which is a good question. He's asking about how to turn in the practice exercises for today. You should email them to John, the TA, and he'll enter them for you. So if you could just take a picture and send it, many people have been doing that, that would be fine, and send it to John. And even though he's quarantining, he can enter that in the grade book, and I'll take a look at those when I look at the grade book. If you have any issues with that, you can email John or me. Yeah, we're happy to answer any questions and make sure it's clear to everybody how to be turning in the work. Yes, Mark, very good question. Is the word order important? Yes, it's very important, both for the attributive adjective and also when using the demonstrative pronoun with the attributive adjective. So let's look at it now. If I want to say this good horse in Hebrew, I have to construct it like this. I have to put the noun first, the adjective second, and the demonstrative pronoun third. Noun first, adjective second, attributive adjective, demonstrative pronoun third. So this will literally be Hasus, Hatov, Hazeh. I hope you can say that with me at home. Hasus, Hatov, Hazeh. So the literal translation we have here is the horse, the good, the this. Feels very awkward in English, but this is how it's done in Hebrew. It has to go in this order, Mark. And the interesting thing about this is to get it into proper English word order, we actually need to read it in reverse. We need to say, this good horse. So for any of these examples, and you can see the variations depending on gender and number. But for any of these variations, it's always going to have to be the noun first, the attributive adjective second, and then the attributive use of the demonstrative pronoun last. And they all have to agree in gender, number, and definiteness. And it just so happens that when we render it into English, we'll go in reverse order. And it will be the same thing with the distant demonstrative pronoun. So let's just, for the sake of the point, make this distant. Instead of it being a near horse, that's good. It's going to be a distant horse. So I would say hasus, hatov, hahu. Literally, the horse, the good, the that. And then I would reverse it and to get my English, that good horse. So you can switch out gender and number and near versus distant in each of these slots. But it must follow this word order. So good point, Mark, to note that. So that's the attributive use of the adjective that we've learned, and also the same attributive function of the demonstrative pronoun. Now let's look at the predicative use. So remember, the demonstrative use, the adjective, or in this case, the demonstrative pronoun, may precede the noun, and it won't take the definite article. So here we have an example. Ze Jesus. Ze Jesus. The demonstrative pronoun it's agreeing in gender and number, but it doesn't take the article. And it's preceding the noun. So it has the indicators, the marks, of being the predicative use. The last example was not a complete sentence, but now we have a complete sentence. We have a predication. As you remember, in nominal sentences in Hebrew, you have to supply the verb to be. And so this example would be translated, this is the horse. This is the horse. I'm supplying the verb to be, and I have a predication that's involved here to make a complete sentence. See how it follows the same pattern that we saw before in the adjectives for the predicative? Now, what if we wanted to make this distant? Who Jesus? Who Jesus? That horse. That is the horse. So it's a distant entity, but I'm constructing a sentence here. I'm making a predication to identify that as the horse. And if I change the number, if I wanted to say Hasusim, then I would say Hem Hasusim. Those are the horses. Or if I wanted to make it near, I could say, right, ele. It has to be ele, depending, it doesn't matter if it's masculine or feminine, it's ele. So it would be ele hasusin. These are the horses. All right, I'm going to write another example up on the board, and I'll give you some time to see if you're ready to move on or if you need to review. Happy to pause and review. We have time. So give me your feedback right now if you're ready to move on or need some more review. Okay, people are doing well, they're tracking. The honorable gentleman from Springfield is on board, tracking, so that's good. All right. People seem to be tracking and ready to move on. Let me just say that there's a paradigm on page 102 that is prime material for quizzing. And it's the paradigm, it's very similar to the one I put up on the board. So note page 102 as a paradigm to learn. And really, you only need to learn those three forms. Ze, zot, ele. Those are the three vocabulary items that you should learn. And we've had that, actually. You've already been working on them because they have been included in the last vocab list for the last chapter. So you're already learning them, but learn them as a paradigm in the proper places for gender and number. And also include within that paradigm the distant demonstrative pronouns. Who, he, him, hena. Which again are pronouns we've already learned, but you need to put them into that paradigm so you can learn them. Not new information or form, not new forms, but the information is that they can be used in the same way to refer to distant things. All right. Let's move on to another type of pronoun in Hebrew, the relative pronoun. The relative pronoun in Hebrew that is most often used is the word asher. I don't believe we had this in our vocabulary list. I don't believe so. So you should make a vocabulary card for this one word, asher. And the beautiful thing about asher is that in Hebrew there's just one form that is multi-purpose. It's multi-duty. And so we don't have to learn a lot of different forms as someone who has learned the English would have to. We only have to learn this one and then figure out how it works in a sentence. So let's back up to talk about what a relative pronoun is. Okay, it's a pronoun, which means it's referring to a noun. But the function of a relative pronoun in the sentence is to give you information that's relative to that noun. It's additional information about the noun. And that might be necessary for the sentence, or it might be unnecessary. A lot of times it's extra information that's not required in the sentence. So if I said, the professor who lives on campus taught the class. Who lives on campus is the relative clause, and it's giving me more information about the professor. He lives on campus. The professor who lives on campus taught the class. So depending on the context, that may or may not be necessary. But you could actually render that sentence as the professor taught the class. You could take it out because it's its own clause, who lives on campus. So in English, we have many different relative pronouns. And so that's why I've put down here different examples. Who, whom, which, what, where, that, and perhaps even some others. So we have many different relative pronouns. So there are going to be different translations that we're going to use for this one word in Hebrew in English. But in Hebrew, they only need this one word to do all these different purposes. So it's going to be easy for us on one side, learning the form, there's just one form to learn, but more tricky in translation. We're going to have to go back to our English knowledge to know which relative pronoun we're going to use in our translation. And we make distinctions in English between the subject and the object, for example, being referred to by the relative pronoun. So if I'm referring to the subject, I would say who. If I'm referring to the object, I would say whom. So in case you're still wondering about the distinction between those two, who and whom, some of us struggle to keep that difference straight and to say it correctly. But who is for the subject, whom is for the object. And we also distinguish between personal subjects and impersonal subjects. So for a man, I would say the man who. But for a rock, I would say the rock that. I wouldn't say who, because it's neuter. So it's impersonal and it's neuter, so I wouldn't use who. So we actually, and that's another one that a lot of people don't, it kind of shifts back and forth and they use that for personal nouns. But technically, you're supposed to use who for a personal noun and that for an impersonal neuter noun. So we make some of these kind of finer distinctions in English when it comes to the relative pronoun. But they don't in this form, the form asher. The form asher can refer to any noun of any gender or number. It's just asher in any case to refer to it with creating a relative clause using this word asher. And the way that this relative pronoun works is that it always follows the noun it's referring to. So if you take a sentence and you have different nouns throughout the sentence, nouns or pronouns throughout the sentence, and you want to add that extra information, you put asher after that noun, and then you add in the extra information that you want to add to the sentence. So it always follows the noun. It modifies, and it always begins a clause. It's you don't just say asher, you say asher something, whatever information you want to give. So if I want to talk about the man, ha'ish, I can use asher because I can use asher for any gender and number, or definiteness. It could be indefinite. A man, who, but I'm going to then put asher after it. Okay, so I have ha'ish, the man, and because I have a guttural here, which rejects the strong dogish, I have compensatory lengthening in this definite article here, ha'ish. Then I have my relative pronoun, asher, and then I have the extra information I want to add here, which is that he went or walked. Ha'ish asher halach. Okay? Now, the man who walked, this is not a complete sentence yet in Hebrew or in English. It's not a complete sentence. It's just a noun with a following relative clause. So, in context, there would have to be more here to form a whole sentence. But this is simply illustrating the fact that we have a noun followed by the relative pronoun. And it doesn't matter what gender, number, or definiteness this is. It's always going to be asher, and it's always going to follow. And then we're going to have the additional information. But notice here, halach is a perfect verb in the call, third person masculine singular. So the verb is agreeing with the noun in the main clause. It has to agree because it's referring to that man. So if I want to change something about this, let's just change the gender, then I'm going to have to change not the relative pronoun. It can always function regardless of these categories. I'm going to have to change the information on the verb. So let's change this to ha'isha. Ha'isha, okay? This is the woman now. Same thing on the article. We have a rejection of the strong dagesh and compensatory lengthening. That's how we get the comments. And remember that woman is spelled a little bit differently than man. It doesn't have the pyrrhic yod. It has a pyrrhic with a strong dagesh in the sheen. Ha'isha, all right? Now I can use asher for this even though it's feminine. It's fine. That's how it works. But I have information in the relative clause that is now in disagreement from the noun that I'm talking about. So now I have to make sure that there's agreement in the relative clause, and I'm going to have to change that verb because I have a masculine singular verb here. So I'm going to change it to a feminine singular verb to match the noun I'm talking about. Okay? So that's the feminine singular form of the perfect. So now I have a noun and a relative clause that work. Ha'isha asher halakha. The woman who walked. So this illustrates the fact that asher can be used with any noun, regardless of its gender, number, or definiteness. And it always is added after that noun to give us the additional information. And it always begins a clause that has this extra information in it. In this case, that the noun was the subject of walking or going. Okay? So make a vocabulary card of asher. I'm telling you right now, as the person who makes the quizzes in this class, make a vocabulary card of asher and learn asher as the relative pronoun, and it can have all these different possible translations in English. Who, whom, which, what, where, that. And if we had more time, we could go into different examples and how we'd have to render them different in English, but we don't have that much time, unfortunately, in this period to do that. So I just want you to get the main concepts of the relative pronoun and how it can work. All right. Right now, I want you to give me some responses, see if you got this idea, the basic idea of the relative pronoun in Hebrew, while I write something else on the board, and we'll see if we can move on. I want to give you this illustration of what we're talking about here, a very important passage in the book of Exodus, one on which we spent a lot of time in Old Testament class talking about God's call to Moses to bring the Israelites out of Egypt, and this argument that they had, and all of Moses' complaints and objections, and God discussing the significance of his name. And with today's lesson in Hebrew, we now have another piece of the puzzle to understand what God was saying. We've already learned, so far we've learned the imperfect verb, and we then went on to learn the third hey roots and the imperfect verb. And that's what we have in ehyeh. We have a first person common singular imperfect verb of the verb haya, to be, and we learned in the third hey that it has the segol hey ending on it when there's no suffix added. So despite the anomaly of a guttural having a shva, remember gutturals tend to have the chatif vowel. We understand that form, ehyeh, quite well, having studied those different aspects. But until now, we didn't know the second word in this construction, asher. So remember, God says, in response to Moses asking, who am I going to say is sending me? God says, ehyeh, asher ehyeh. And we discussed how that could be translated in different ways, given the imperfect. But in the context, I made the argument for you because God is saying, Ehya imach, I will be with you in the Exodus, in salvation in Egypt. I will reveal my character through that salvation. That this is best taken in context as an imperfect talking about the future. So God says, Ehya asher ehya. I will be who I will be. Okay? I will be who I will be. In other words, this is a relative clause that's restating the thing that it's referring to. So the relative, we've been looking at nouns. Here we have it being used with some verbs. And it's sort of like it is what it is, or it will be what it will be. It's saying that that thing or occurrence will define itself. God is saying, I will define myself. I will articulate my identity in what I will do in Egypt using the relative pronoun asher. Okay? Getting good feedback. People seem to have the basic grasp of the relative pronoun. I want to give you one more grammar point before we look at our vocabulary list. And we'll see if anybody out there in TV land has a mnemonic. So if you're, hopefully, you've already read the chapter and you've already at least quickly gone over the vocabulary. Let's see, and maybe I'll give an award for a good mnemonic. Think if you have a mnemonic for any word on the vocabulary list that you could share with the rest of us. So I'm just giving you some time to think about that. Before we go to the vocabulary list, we want to look at one more use of the hey in Hebrew. Remember, I like to say, Hebrews say, hey, we're the Hebrews, because they love to use heys for all kinds of purposes. What are some heys we've seen so far? The comet's hey, feminine ending. We've seen the hey at the beginning of the word, the definite article ha. Last time we were looking at the third person feminine singular possessive pronoun suffix. Also comet's hey, but remember it has that little dot. The I peaking, it's the ma peak to indicate that it's actually the pronoun suffix rather than the feminine ending. So, and there actually are others that we have yet to learn. So we're going to see lots of uses of the hey. This is another use of the hey, the directive hey, or sometimes called the locative hey. So what does that mean? Directive means direction or movement toward. And so in English, we actually have a suffix that works sort of like this. It's the suffix ward. Technical difficulties. We're using blue. There we go. Word. So I could have the word home, and then if I wanted, it doesn't indicate direction toward it, to it. But if I wanted to convey that, I could say homeward. I'm going homeward. So I add the suffix onto the word home to show movement or direction toward it. And so this is the primary use of this hey ending, but sometimes it can also just indicate location. So that's why sometimes it's called the locative hey. It indicates that something is positioned at a particular place. So what is this ending? Well, it's a comet's hey, as we've seen before. It's a comet's hey. How's that for visibility? You should be able to see that. Comet's hey. So how do we tell the difference between this and the feminine ending? Because this is the other hey that looks very much like this. Okay, we know that the pronoun ending has the ma peak in it, so that distinguishes it. But how do we know that this comet's hey ending is not the feminine singular ending? Well, because this hey ending with the comets is never accented. It's never accented. And so you'll start to see why it does make a difference where the accent is placed. In some cases, it can distinguish between different words or different forms where the accent is. So that's one of the reasons why I've been helping you to try to get your accents in the right place. In addition to the fact that it sounds better when you get it in the right place, it can make a difference in the meaning. And so this is one of those cases. It never has the accent on that final syllable. So I'm putting this accent over here to show that it's not on the ah. It's always going to be over here. And that's the thing that's going to tell you that this is a directive hey, or a locative hey. Okay, so let's look at an example. Ear, city, ear. If I want to say a city word toward the city, I will put on this ending, locative hey, but the accent is going to stay here. So it's not ira, which would seem to indicate that it was feminine, but it's ira, toward the city. So I'm telling you right now, make a card of the locative hey. Make a card and put on one side of the card comets, hey, and then put the accent over here, not on the last syllable. And then on the other side, write directive hey, indicating direction, movement toward, direction toward. So this is a form to learn and to put on a vocabulary card to test yourself. Any mnemonics out there? I'm going to conclude our time with the vocabulary list. So as we usually do with people in class, you repeat after me as we do the vocabulary list. It's going to be on page 104 of your textbook. Upper right-hand column, the top word. Repeat after me. Bahema. Good pronunciation. I'm assuming that it is good pronunciation. Bahema means an animal. And if you remember in the book of Job, God talks about these fearsome beasts, Leviathan, and what's the other one? Behemoth is what we normally say, or behemoth. That's this word, animal. But it has the ending oat. What ending is that? The feminine singular ending. So it doesn't, feminine plural ending. It doesn't mean that it's plural. In that case, that ending appears to be used to magnify, almost like a plural of majesty, to magnify how powerful this beast is. So it's a super beast. But it's not a behemah, it's a behemoth. Super beast. Next form. Repeat after me. Bakar. Bakar is a herd. Repeat after me. Pag. Pag is a bull. Repeat after me. Tson. Tson is a flock. Repeat after me. Yavesh. Yavesh means to be dry or to wither. It's a stative verb. Left-hand column. Repeat after me. Yatav. Yatav means to be good, another stative verb. But notice that it's related to the adjective we know, tov. Right? You see that tet bait of tov in the verb, yatav. Repeat after me. Yalad. Yalad means to give birth. Now, I can give you a mnemonic on this one. Believe me, I've been there before. When a woman gives birth to a baby, it yells loud. Yalad. When the baby is born. To give birth. Repeat after me. Yatar. Yatar means to form. This is the word used for when God forms or fashions the first man. It's a word used for a potter sculpting. He fashions or sculpts the first man. And repeat after me. Yareh. Yareh. To be afraid. It's a stative verb. And finally, repeat after me. Yarash. Yarash means to inherit. I have some mnemonics coming in here. Okay? Mark says the flock sticks to its sound. Oh, its own dad jokes? I think you're taking it in a different direction. I thought you were going like you have a town, a sound, and then you have herds around it. But its own dad jokes, okay? If it works for you, sometimes the weirder it is, the better it works for your memory. Ignacio, did you give birth to Yalad, your lad? Okay, another take on that one. Oh, it sticks to its sown. Its own. Okay, that's better. That makes sense, Mark. Thank you. I was thinking of to fear like a Martian with a ray gun. I fear your ray. I fear your ray. You might disintegrate me with your ray gun. All right. I think we've come to the end of our time period for today. Keep working on your mnemonic devices and your vocabulary. And learn the paradigm on page 102. Make a vocabulary card for asher and a vocabulary card for the directive hey ending. And please submit your practices to Jonathan, the TA, and we'll get those entered for you. And give me feedback about how we have returned the quizzes. And let me know if that's working for you. All right, thanks everybody.